Hi, it's me. It's the 7th of September and I am pretty gassed to be back at work, as the youth say. I only did one day's work last week due to holiday, essentially. I've only got 3 days at work this week, but 3 is a lot better than 1, so I'm excited to get on with it. To the point where I don't even want to take a couple of minutes to read through my notes for this video, so bear with me. I'm going to read through each note that I've made and then just explain it as I go. I'll try and make it flow as much as possible. So it's I think what I'm going to be doing in general on Fridays is doing the build from scratch for the Thursday, the day before, but at the end of the Friday I'm also going to do the episode for that Friday, just because I don't want to be making it on Monday and having to think back 2.5, 3 days to what I was doing the week before. However, on Friday, because it was my only day's work last week, I just ran out of time at the end of the day, so this time I'm doing this. Okay, so here we go. Last Friday I began by messing around reading a book for a couple of hours. It's been a long week of tiring holiday and I needed a bit of me time. So there you go, my 1 day of work that week, and I spent a couple of hours reading a book. If you're interested to know, it's called Agent Running in the Field by John le Carré. I believe he's quite a prolific author. I've certainly heard his name a lot of times in the past. I've never read any of his books before. I'm finding it reasonably enjoyable. He uses the same phrases over and over again, which I find a bit peculiar. This one I'm reading at the moment, he always refers to his share colleagues, meaning dear colleagues, as when he's writing about the bloke who was the protagonist of the story. And for some reason he uses that phrase like 50 times in the book, rather than ever changing it up, which I find a bit peculiar. But the story is quite enjoyable. And it involves a spy, or at least a spy runner, who likes playing badminton. And I like playing badminton, and I wouldn't mind being a spy, so it's a little bit of me. So I did that. The reason why I did that is because I've got 2 little kids at home, and life is pretty tiring. And last week me and my wife had most of the week off, except for just for the Friday, because it was bank holiday Monday. So no nursery. Both the kids go to nursery normally on a Monday. And then also we have help from the grandparents normally on a Wednesday. But they have recently been on holiday to Croatia, and we are currently in COVID-19 times. And Croatia is on the UK's quarantine list. So since they got home, they've had to spend a couple of weeks, which they're now halfway through, not seeing anyone. So we have the kids on the Wednesday too, and we have them on the Tuesday normally. So anyway, the point is, we've both had pretty much the whole week off just looking after the boys, and that is really tiring. So by Friday morning, when I finally got to actually be by myself for a bit of time, I just wanted to lie down and have a read of a book. And I'm committed to this effort to start and grow this business. I'm excited about it. It's great. But I'm only human. And also, I'm 40 years old. I remember what I was like when I was 30 and in my 20s, and perhaps if I was starting something like this then, especially if it was the first time I'd ever started a business, whereas my actual situation is that I've done this to a small extent a couple of times before. If that weren't the case, I might be more single track minded about how I'm spending my time, but I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and I realise that whilst I do need to get on with this and spend the vast majority of my time doing it and put as much energy into it as, I'm not going to say possible, but reasonably practicable, there is still some justification, some need to do other bits and pieces too, to keep yourself happy. So that's what I did. Anyway, that gave me most of the rest of the day for work. So I started working on the website. for the first time in quite a while, really, because I've just been doing this processing of the videos, the podcast, etc. It's taken me so much longer than I anticipated, but it is pretty much done now. The only thing I've yet to do is, not yet to do, the next step in it is that when I'm processing this video, plus the last, I think I've got 3 more stacked up now, I'll be going through the process again, obviously, like I will be for every set of video edits. But this one will be the first time I've done it after getting to the end of kind of making the process. So it's going to be a bit of a process in itself. I'm sure I'm going to be tidying up plenty of my notes, but I think it's going to go from however long it took to do the last set of videos, which I'm going to say was probably about a week's worth of work, down from about 2.5 weeks the first time I actually did the process at all. This time it's going to be way down. I suspect I'll get it all done well within a day, which is obviously going to be very much moving in the right direction, given that in the future I'm hoping to do the processing of 5 videos in hopefully as little as about 4 or 5 hours. So I've still got to do that, but essentially that is done. So I got back to working on the website. I changed the look of the Built From Scratch blog page, trying to make it look cleaner and simpler. So yes, I did that, and it worked. I got rid of the sidebar, because at the moment the sidebar just has the one widget in it, which is the recent posts widget, which on single blog posts is necessary. Well, it's not necessary, but I like having it there, because if someone has taken the time and has the interest in reading one of my posts, I think it's quite likely they're going to want to read some of the other posts, and therefore I do want to advertise them there to keep that person hooked in if they're interested, hopefully with a view to them actually getting familiar enough with the brand that it sticks in their head. But I don't want it on all of the pages, and I don't want it on the central blog repository, because I think it's more just distracting there, and essentially all of that information is going to be on the page itself. So I got rid of that, changed the layout from stacked tiles to a 4-column layout. So the natural way the page was organised in this theme, well, rather this particular site layout within the theme, was just to have wide and shallow tiles for each post, just in a vertical line, which I just didn't think looked great. So I've now changed it so that we've got 4 columns going across the screen, and I've added images into those. So there's now a sort of 16:9 type ratio landscape image at the top of the tile, with the title beneath it, and then a brief bespoke excerpt as well underneath. So a little bit of information about what you're looking at, the episode number, and an image, and the whole thing I think looks quite good now. So then I spent some time laying out a step-by-step process for finding, sizing and saving images in Canva for use as featured images. All that needs saying about that is the featured image is just a thing in WordPress in some themes, maybe pretty much all of them, where you can input an image which will then be used in pre-specified places. In my site, certainly the way things are at the moment, the only place I'm going to be using the featured image is on, as I just mentioned, on the Built From Scratch blog posts page, just as those images in the grid. I hope I'm not causing myself a problem for the future by using the featured image there. I suppose it's possible that I might end up wanting to use it somewhere else in the site, and the settings I need to keep in place to make it look right on the blog post page might need changing. I don't know, whatever. That's too much speculation. That's what I'm doing at the moment. So I need to find images for the featured image. And Canva is a bit of a funny one. It seems to be built for fairly sort of amateurish users. It's quite user friendly in a lot of ways, or at least that's the kind of vibe I get from it, is that it's supposed to be easy to use. I actually find it a little bit unintuitive sometimes in some ways. I'm open-minded to the possibility that that's because perhaps I'm not using it in quite the way that it's supposed to be used. Like when you create a new design, it gives you a whole list of publications that you might be aiming to create. So we're talking like logos, web page, like A3 booklet. I don't know, I can't make any more up. I just know I've seen the list and there's loads of sizes that it's suggesting you use, and it's therefore trying to take you down the path of creating a specific type of publication. And so far that's not really what I've been using it for at all. I've just been using it to source images, and then because it has some built-in processing ability, I've been using it to make a few changes to the images before I download them. So maybe it's just the way I'm using it that makes it not that obvious, but I felt it could do with a quick guide so I don't have to think through it afresh every time. So I took a little bit of time to put that together. I then changed the precise format of how I'm writing H1 titles, meta titles, meta descriptions and excerpts to optimize the look and use of characters with particular reference to how they display on the blog page. I'm aiming for that to be a single point of reference. Okay, so what I mean by this is between the website and that breaks down into the blog posts page and the single blog posts, YouTube, podcasts, various podcast platforms. Is that it? Yeah. All these different places that I'm putting this essentially same bit of content into, they all have places where I need to input titles and descriptions. And whilst I'm going to be using the same central phrase per episode across those platforms, there are slight differences you can make in terms of, do you include like episode and number in the title or the description or not, or if you are, do you have it at the start or the end? And they may seem like very small considerations. They kind of are, I suppose, but I'm getting to that point now with this media production process that I am the major things kind of are wrapped up, and I am now moving on to just the bits around the edges that are more debatable in terms of how worthwhile they are. But for me, this has just come on the side of, yes, it is worthwhile optimizing to make sure that they look right on the page, and that any kind of keywords are nearer the front, if that's applicable, and if it allows them to still be aesthetically okay, and also making sure that in the places where character limits are the strictest, I'm not wasting characters. So that took a little bit of time just to figure out what was for the best there, but that's done now. I next have written that I struggled for a while trying to center the YouTube videos. That means like center align. So we're on the website now talking about making the embedded videos be in the center of the page. They were left aligned naturally. I ended up working it out with the help of Stack Overflow and a bit of coding knowledge. So the reason I mentioned that is Stack Overflow, if you're not aware of it, is a website where it's like a forum where people ask questions to do with computer programming, coding, software development. It's called all kinds of things these days. I'm just about old enough to remember when it was generally referred to as computer programming, but I think software development and engineering is the more frequently used phrase these days. And so it's a really great website, actually. They have very strict rules about how you ask questions and the non-duplication of questions and how you answer. I won't try and tell you too much about it, but for example, I know that when you ask a question, you are supposed to include the steps that you've taken so far and actually paste in any code that you've written. So instead of asking people, just a general question and hoping that they give you a whole solution, you tell them what you've done so far and ask for really quite a specific answer. And there are often very, very useful responses with code included that you can actually use to help you with your project. So that's great. And I don't know a lot about software development, but I have actually been, about 3 years ago now, on a 3-month coding boot camp. I didn't end up getting a job as a software developer out of it, which was kind of the point of the boot camp, both in general and for me specifically, for reasons that I would quite like to talk about one day, but only if I get lots of time to do it. That didn't end up being the case for me, but I did learn some useful basic stuff about software development, which helps me sometimes to do bits of web development, and it helped me in this case understand that when I was looking at the CSS, which is the code that you use to make a website look the way it does, I understood what I was looking at enough to take an answer from Stack Overflow, which was related to what I needed but wasn't perfect, and I was able to change it and use it for my own purposes in such a way that it ended up working, so I was able to center the YouTube videos. I also added padding to various single blog page elements. So just to clarify, what I mean by when I'm talking about a single blog page is an actual post as opposed to the page that displays all the posts. So it looks quite good now. All I mean by that is I added titles of video, podcast and transcription to obviously the video, podcast and transcription sections of the posts, and then spaced out the actual embedded video and podcasts and where the text starts for the transcription, just so that looks okay, to the point where I'm really quite happy now with the aesthetics of the posts. They are now good enough that I can leave that for ages, months, years, potentially forever, without needing to get professional help to make them look better. I think they're already kind of acceptable. I checked across desktop, tablet and mobile. This is a great feature of WordPress, which it's kind of new to me in WordPress. I certainly remember using WordPress a few years ago and this wasn't something it could do, or at least I wasn't aware of it. It wasn't as obvious as it is now, whereby you can display a page of your website as the viewer sees it within WordPress, in other words without having to leave the WordPress setup, but at the same time there are still WordPress options available on the screen, including the option to display that page as if you were in one of desktop, tablet or on a mobile. So for example, if you select mobile, most of the screen you're looking at gets blanked out down the sides and compressed, so it's like you're looking at a smartphone screen on your monitor. And because all websites are responsive these days, which means that the parts of the web pages move around, the fundamental meaning of responsive is that it changes to suit the size of screen it's on. And how it does that is the code behind the website will actually move elements of the screen around quite a lot sometimes to make sure that they are displayed in a way that makes sense for the size of screen they're on, which is quite a big difference when you're moving from the biggest, so a desktop monitor, down to a smartphone screen. Which, just to digress for a second, the reason why this responsiveness is a thing that exists is because some handful of years ago now, Google decided, and the other search engines decided, that it's the prevalence of smartphones was growing to the point where it was no longer really acceptable to make websites that look good on a monitor, but then on a mobile they don't fit on the screen, so you would have to scroll around trying to look at tiny text and pinch and zoom, and essentially it was a lot of sites were a bit of a nightmare to look at on a smartphone. So they decided that people needed to start making websites that would display properly on mobile, and consequently they announced that they'd actually be awarding better rankings essentially for websites that worked well on mobile. There's more to it than that, but that's probably more than enough for this video. So what I was actually saying is WordPress now allows you to check those 3 displays just in one place at one time with a couple of clicks of the mouse, which is incredibly useful. I remember the first website that I ever built, which was kind of actually before responsive mobile design became a thing, but whatever, even before it was required by Google, it was still useful to have a responsive website, and I completely failed to do that. In fact, I was so new to the whole thing. I finished my website, or at least I thought it was finished, having only ever looked at the way it displays on desktop, and having only ever looked at the way it displayed in one particular browser. So I was absolutely dismayed when, having launched it thinking it was perfect, I then realised on quite a few devices and quite a few browsers it was completely broken. So the fact that you can check that in one quick place is an excellent feature of WordPress. I was happy with the result. There was nothing broken, which is completely due to the creators of the GeneratePress theme, of course. They're the people who program the responsiveness, and they have done such a good job that even though I paid no attention to trying to help it work, it just did anyway, because it does. So I turned the post I was working on into a new version of the built from scratch post template. So when I'm putting these posts together in the future, it's going to be just a matter of copy and pasting the embed codes and the transcription in. It should take literally a minute to do those in the future. It did mean I had to manually update the 7 posts that were already posted, but that just took an hour or so. No big deal. I then transcribed the first 7 episodes using Otter, which does a great job. I just had to correct the first sentence or two, because what seems to happen is, well, sorry, I say seems to happen. I know for a fact that Otter is clever enough that it assesses the context of every word and every sentence to try and ensure that it has understood that word and that sentence correctly. And consequently, well, according to my sort of anecdotal evidence from having used it a few times, I think it struggles for the first couple of sentences. It seems to make a lot of mistakes, which would make a lot of sense because it doesn't have that contextual help. So with a view to keeping editing time to virtually 0, I've not allowed myself to then move on and do any further editing, but just that first sentence or 2 each time is worth a few seconds to make sure it's not complete nonsense. Okay, nearly there. Oh, in fact, so that was it for the end of Friday. So then just a couple of things to note from over the weekend. The first is a minor one. I actually listened to my own built from scratch introduction on Podcast Addict. Just out of a minor bit of narcissism, Podcast Addict is the podcast app I use to listen to other podcasts, and I was excited to search on it for my own podcast and found that it was in fact available. So I downloaded it, listened to it a bit, and was disappointed to find that certainly in the introduction I said a hell of a lot of times, like 1,000 times. It was painful to listen to be honest. There you go, there's a quick one. I can only hope that for someone listening to it that isn't me, perhaps it's not nearly as in your face. You know what it's like whenever you listen to your own voice, it sounds horrible, and whenever you look at a picture of yourself you tend to think you don't look great. But generally speaking, when other people listen to you, well, they're just hearing the voice that they hear all the time, and people don't normally walk around telling me you've got a stupid voice, just like I don't walk around listening to other people talking and think that they've got a stupid voice. So that's all fine, but it really was obvious to me how many times I was saying and therefore I have determined that I will try and say it a bit less in future videos. It's very hard. I rather suspect that if I listen back to this video that I've made today, I've probably done it a lot. I know that I've done it 3 or 4 times just in the time that I've been talking about trying to not do it. But you know, we'll see how we get on. I definitely won't be achieving perfection there, but I'll do my best. The other thing was, God, there you go, another It really is tricky. I need to just, how do I actually combat this? I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world to make that noise whilst you're thinking about what word to say next. Pretty much everyone does it. So I'm not going to try and make myself not do it at all, but I just want to try and cut it down a little bit. I suppose the trick is to realise that if you are simply silent for a couple of seconds whilst you think about what to say next, that's okay. We'll see how that goes. Also, you know, so now that I'm consciously thinking about it, as I start to think about what to say next, it almost feels like it's just a completely natural audio on-ramp to actually saying a word. Which sounds kind of ridiculous, but, you know, trying not to do it makes you realise how unnatural it seems to just stop and say the next word without going, and then I did this. I don't know. Let's at least try and do this last paragraph without doing it, and then we'll see how we go. The other thing that happened over the weekend is my wife works in healthcare and was on maternity leave when the COVID-19 pandemic really ramped up in the UK. So around March 2020, she was meant to be going back to work in May, but ended up going back in March, and works in a practice, she works in general practice, which for anyone watching this that's not in the UK means like a family doctor setup. And in the UK they are kind of pseudo private. They're funded by the government, by the NHS, but they are run in a somewhat independent kind of way, so they have some flexibility around payments. And she went back to work telling everyone that she wasn't expecting payment. There was a crisis going on, so she was just going to work, and they said okay, thanks very much. But then the government announced that or rather the NHS, I think it was, announced to practices that there would be money available for expenses that were taken on, which could be shown to be to do with COVID, and they ended up putting in a claim for whatever it was they'd spent, and part of that was some money to pay her for the work that she did. So we got, I think it was about £2,500 the other day that we weren't really expecting to get. And since we've done a lot of kind of family finances planning over the last 2 or 3 months, we've decided to really get on top of it, and we're fairly confident things are okay. We don't sort of have spare money coming in, but we're on top of things, and therefore this £2,500 was kind of like money that we didn't, strictly speaking, need. You know, we could actually have a bit of fun with it, which is something we've not really had the opportunity to do for quite a while. So we actually went shopping, and she literally just went clothes shopping, which I know is quite normal for a lot of people, but it's not something we tend to do, really. So she went and, you know, just bought some nice things, and I didn't, because I'm really not that bothered about buying clothes, as you can perhaps tell. And I just sat and I went to the pub while she went shopping and had a beer. It was a Brewdog pub. It was a Punk IPA, which is probably my favourite beer and has been for a while now. And I thought that what I would perhaps do is bring forward the testing of a retail element of what I'm doing with Wavetether. So I looked on Alibaba for a product that I might be able to buy a reasonable amount of for about £1,000, and found some LED lights which could be the right kind of thing to go for. I think they are, by the standards of things on Alibaba, they are relatively unique. There were not many people offering them for sale, and they don't seem to exist on Amazon, and they were affordable in the sense that the minimum order quantity was only 100, and they're charging, I think, about £10 per item at that sort of level of quantity. So I haven't put in an order yet. I'm going to actually make a couple more steps with this website before I delve into that, but I'm thinking that maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks I might stick an order in, and then perhaps just do, I'm going to stay away from Amazon for now, and I think I'm actually going to let them arrive here and have a go at, maybe use Google Shopping to advertise them and box them up myself, and just sort of learn that side of things from the ground up. Anyway, I think I'll stop going on about this because it's such a sort of new thing. I don't really know what I'm talking about at the moment. Just to note that that is a possibility. So I think we'll call that a day. Yeah, that's been quite a lot of video. That's over half an hour today. But you know, maybe I need to stop being so bothered about how long I'm talking for. In terms of the impact on productivity on the rest of my day, well, the difference between making a 15-minute video and a half-hour video is actually not that big a deal. And in terms of whether it's concise, interesting content or not, well, that's kind of missing the point. It's not really meant to be. It's not really meant to be anything. It's not meant to be particularly concise or even particularly interesting. It's this whole idea that it's just an ongoing, completely transparent narrative of what I get up to. So yeah, I don't care if it was boring, and I'm going to stop there and get back to work. See you later.